The air in the hallway feels thin, colder than it should be inside, carrying the faint, metallic tang of something wrong, something burnt but not from the kitchen. It's the smell of betrayal, acrid and sharp, clinging to the expensive wallpaper I picked out myself. My hand shakes against the cool plaster as I lean my weight into it, trying to hold myself upright. The sound of their laughter, light and careless, drifts through the door from the living room. Their laughter. Him and her. My chest tightens, a physical clench that steals my breath. My knuckles are white where I grip the envelope. It's thick, heavy with glossy brochures and confirmation papers. Resort logos bloom like toxic flowers across the surface. A luxury spa in the mountains. 2 nights. The dates stamped clearly, coinciding perfectly with the time he said he was on a business trip. 2 names. Not mine. The numbers on the bill confirmation swim in front of my eyes. Huge and accusatory. A number far, far too close to the gaping hole I found in my savings account this morning. The sound of their voices rises again. A shared joke, a soft, intimate murmur that's never been meant for me. It washes over me, pulling me under a tide of nausea and cold, quiet fury. I press my forehead against the wall, the cool surface a small anchor in the spinning world. This is what the money was for. This stolen joy. This shared secret bought with my future, my sacrifice. The laughter stops. A chair scrapes back. Footsteps. They're coming. And I am standing here, holding the proof, the smell of their deceit thick in the air, the sound of their happiness echoing the emptiness inside me. My heart beats a frantic, trapped rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of rising dread and something else, something hard and cold beginning to form in the pit of my stomach. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Life before this felt quiet, predictable, safe. We had routines that were comfortable, like worn-in slippers. Mornings meant coffee brewed just the way he liked it, the rustle of the newspaper, or the digital version now, but the sound still felt papery, the shared silence that wasn't awkward, but companionable. Evenings were often spent on the couch, half watching something mindless on TV, talking about our days or not talking at all, just being near. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 7. There were no grand gestures anymore, no breathless declarations, but there was a steady current of assumed trust, a quiet understanding that felt more valuable, more real. It was the bedrock. We had plans, too. Not the spontaneous, wild plans of youth, but solid, sensible ones. Renovating the kitchen next year. A trip to Italy for our 10th anniversary, something I'd dreamed about since I was a kid, the kind of trip you save for, meticulously, penny by penny. We had a joint account for bills, the mundane necessities, and separate savings accounts. Mine was for the Italy trip for our trip. Every extra dollar went into it. I packed lunches instead of buying them, skipped the expensive coffee shops, wore shoes until the soles wore thin. It wasn't deprivation, it was investment. An investment in a shared future, a shared dream. He knew about it. He'd joke about me being a squirrel, hoarding nuts for winter, but there was affection in his voice, a shared vision. He had his own savings for his own things, maybe a new car, maybe some tech gadget he'd been eyeing. We were partners, working towards our individual and collective futures, respecting each other's goals. My goal felt tangible, close. I could almost taste the pasta, feel the cobblestones under my feet. That was my normal. Quiet, trusting, building towards something beautiful together. The first tremor wasn't violent, just a subtle shift in the ground beneath my feet. It came in the form of a banking alert on my phone, a notification that felt too large for a normal transaction. It wasn't from the joint account. It was from mine. The savings account. My squirrel hoard. I opened the app, a knot forming low in my stomach. The balance was wrong. Significantly wrong. A single, enormous withdrawal. Dated 2 days ago. My finger hovered over the screen, tracing the numbers, unable to comprehend them. This wasn't a bill, wasn't a transfer I'd initiated. It was too big for anything we'd discussed, anything I'd planned. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at my skin. Had I been hacked? Was this some kind of elaborate scam? I checked the transaction details. It wasn't a transfer. It was a payment to a company I didn't recognize. A luxury travel agency, the name read. My heart began to hammer. Luxury travel agency? I scrolled through my transaction history, confirming what I already knew. I hadn't authorized this. Not even close. This was impossible. This was theft. But from whom? Who had access? Only me. And him. The thought, cold and heavy, landed in my gut.
No.
Not him. Never him. This was a mistake.
A glitch.
It had to be. My normal, predictable world was tilting. My early struggles were a frantic dance between denial and burgeoning dread. I called the bank first, my voice tight, trying to sound calm while my insides churned. They were polite, efficient. Confirmed the transaction. Said it was initiated online, from an IP address linked to our home network. My hand trembled as I hung up. Not a hacker. Not a glitch. This was internal. I confronted him that evening, trying to keep my voice even, holding the phone out to him, the banking app open. Did you make a large payment from my savings account? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up from his tablet, his eyes flicking towards the phone, then back to the screen, a flicker of something I couldn't quite read crossing his face. Annoyance? Guilt? What are you talking about? He asked, too casually. I explained the transaction, the luxury travel agency. He frowned, feigning confusion. No, that's crazy. Why would I do that? Maybe it's a scam? You should call the bank again. He was good. Too good. He deflected, suggested explanations that didn't fit, turned the focus back onto me and my perceived error. I felt a cold knot tighten. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the lie. The immediate, casual lie. I watched him, searching his face for a sign, a tell, anything.
But it was a mask.
A smooth, convincing mask. The bedrock of my trust felt crumbly underfoot. I spent the next few days in a fog. I checked bank statements again, combed through emails, looked for any sign of a legitimate reason for the transaction. There was nothing. The money was just gone, swallowed by this mysterious luxury travel agency. I asked him again, different angles, trying to catch him out. He remained calm, consistent in his denial. He even suggested I report my card stolen, involve the police. The audacity was breathtaking. Each lie he told wasn't just a lie about the money. It was a lie about us, about the partnership, about the trust. The gap between the man I thought I knew and the man standing in front of me widened, a chasm opening between us. Sleep offered no escape. My nights were filled with anxious tossing, replaying conversations, searching for clues I'd missed. The predictability of my life had vanished, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty and the cold, hard reality that the person I trusted most was actively deceiving me. The problems intensified, weaving a tightening net around me. His lies grew more elaborate, more defensive. He started leaving his phone locked, screen down, a small, telling gesture that screamed secrecy. He was jumpy, easily irritated. Any question about money, about his time, about anything slightly outside our established routine, met with a wall of defensiveness or manufactured anger. Why are you interrogating me? He'd snap. Don't you trust me? The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Trust? The word felt like a mockery now. I started noticing other things. Small, seemingly insignificant details that, in hindsight, painted a clearer picture. Late nights that used to be rare became more frequent, accompanied by vague excuses about working late or grabbing a drink with colleagues I'd never heard him mention before. He started paying more attention to his appearance, buying new clothes, cologne. Changes that, when viewed through the lens of suspicion, felt less like self-improvement and more like preparation for someone else. The amount of money taken was significant enough to impact our immediate finances, not just my long-term savings. Bills that were normally comfortable became a stretch. He seemed unconcerned, or perhaps more accurately, expected me to just handle it. The sheer nerve of it felt like a physical blow. He had stolen my financial security, undermined our shared future, and was now passively benefiting from my struggle to keep things afloat. I felt like a fool. Naive.
Blind.
The resentment simmered beneath the surface, a low, constant burn. The more I questioned, the more he retreated, building walls of silence and accusation. The man I loved was becoming a stranger, a hostile entity occupying the same space, actively working against me. It wasn't just the money. It was the calculated cruelty of the deception, the gaslighting, the slow, deliberate dismantling of everything I thought we were. The midpoint shift wasn't a single explosion, but a slow-motion crumble, a structural collapse that redefined the landscape. It came in pieces, like shrapnel from a bomb. First, a stray text message notification on his phone, left carelessly on the counter while he was in the shower. Just the top line visible on the lock screen. A woman's name, unfamiliar, followed by heart emojis and the words, "Can't wait for the weekend." My blood ran cold. The spa brochure, the missing money, the luxury travel agency, the secrecy, the late nights, it all slammed together with sickening force. The pieces fit. It wasn't a scam. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. He wasn't just hiding debt or a bad investment. He was having an affair. And he had used my money, my savings for our future trip, to fund a romantic getaway with her. The physical shock was profound. My knees buckled, and I braced myself against the counter, the cool surface a small comfort against the sudden heat of my rage. Betrayal. The word resonated in my bones. Not just financial betrayal, but the deepest, most personal kind. He had stolen my future, my trust, my love, and used it as currency for his infidelity. The pain was a physical ache, sharp and suffocating, but beneath it, something else was stirring. Something hard, something cold. This wasn't just about being hurt anymore. This was about being violated. The man I had built my life with, shared my bed with, planned a future with, was a stranger, a thief, a liar, and an adulterer. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had shattered the foundation of my reality. And that realization shifted everything. The confusion, the anxiety, the hurt, it began to crystallize into something far more dangerous, a cold, hard determination. The victim collapsed in that moment, replaced by a woman who saw clearly, who felt the sting of injustice, and who was no longer interested in understanding or forgiveness. She was interested in restitution.
And retribution.
The world hadn't just tilted, it had flipped upside down, and I was finding my footing in the new, brutal gravity. Everything fell apart. Rapidly. I confronted him, not with tears, but with a quiet, chilling calm that seemed to unnerve him more than any shouting could have. I laid it all out, the missing money, the travel agency payment, the text message. His face went through a series of rapid changes, disbelief, fear, then a hard, defensive anger. He didn't deny it, not really. The jig was up. Instead, he lashed out, accusing me of spying, of being paranoid, of driving him away. He tried to twist it, to make me the villain. It was breathtaking in its cruelty. He admitted, grudgingly, that yes, he'd used the money. For something important. He refused to name her, refused to give details, but the implication hung heavy in the air. This wasn't a fling. This was serious enough for him to steal from his wife to fund it. He showed no remorse for the theft, only anger at being caught. The man who had promised to love and cherish me stood before me, a thief who had plundered my life savings for another woman, and his primary emotion was inconvenience at my discovery. My financial situation was now dire. The money I had saved, the buffer, the future was gone. My meticulously planned trip was a phantom. I had bills coming up that I didn't know how I would pay. He offered no solution, no apology, no attempt to make amends. He acted as if I were the problem for discovering his elaborate web of deceit. I felt utterly alone, adrift in the wreckage of my marriage and my financial security. He made it clear he wasn't going to give the money back. He seemed to believe he was entitled to it, or at least that he could just get away with it. The legal avenues seemed complicated, slow, and potentially more expensive than the amount stolen. It felt like he had won. He had taken my money, was having his affair, and I was left with nothing but the emotional and financial devastation. Despair gnawed at me. How could I possibly recover? How could I fight this? It felt impossible. All seemed lost. The turning point wasn't a sudden flash of inspiration, but a slow, simmering hardening of my core. I sat alone in the quiet house after he'd stormed out, leaving me in the ruins. I looked at the empty space in my savings account, a physical representation of the gaping hole in my life. I thought of the years of saving, the sacrifices, the dream of Italy. I thought of his face, cold and unrepentant, accusing me of being the problem. I thought of her, enjoying a luxurious spa weekend funded by my hard work and his betrayal. And something inside me snapped, but not in a messy, emotional way. It snapped into focus. I wasn't just a victim of theft. I was a victim of calculated, deliberate cruelty. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had weaponized my trust, my love, my plans against me. And he thought he was going to get away with it. A quiet, dangerous resolve settled over me. I wouldn't be his casualty. I wouldn't simply lick my wounds and let him walk away with his ill-gotten gains and his mistress. He had used the system, the ease of online transfers, the anonymity of a luxury travel agency, to betray me. I would use the system back. My thoughts became sharp, precise. What was the transaction? A large payment to a luxury travel agency for a spa weekend. How was it paid? Online, from my account, without my authorization. What was his intent? To use stolen funds for a personal, illicit purpose. The pieces clicked into place, forming a new kind of plan. Not revenge, not really, but a strategic counterattack. He had made a move on a chessboard he thought was empty, but he had missed my queen, waiting in the corner. I wasn't going to just report a domestic dispute. I was going to report a crime. A financial crime. And I knew exactly how to hit him where it would hurt the most, immediately, in a way he would never see coming. My hands stopped shaking. My mind felt clear, focused. The despair was still there, a low hum, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective instinct for myself, for my future, for the principle of it all. He had underestimated me.
Terribly.
And that was his final, fatal mistake. I wouldn't just survive this. I would dismantle his victory piece by piece. The quiet woman who saved for Italy was gone. In her place was someone colder, sharper, armed with a quiet fury and a clear objective. The climax arrived not with shouting, but with the sterile, electronic chirp of a phone line connecting. My fingers were steady as I dialed the number for the luxury spa resort. The one listed on the brochure, I found. My heart hammered against my ribs, but it was a controlled beat, not a panicked flutter. I had practiced this in my head, rehearsed the words, anticipated the questions. I spoke to reservations, my voice polite but firm. I explained that I was calling about a recent booking made from my account without my authorization. I gave them the name on the reservation, his name, and the other name, the one I now knew belonged to her. I provided the dates, the confirmation number I'd found. I stated clearly that the payment was fraudulent. I wasn't just canceling, I was initiating a fraud alert on the transaction with their resort. The person on the other end of the line was initially confused, then concerned. They asked questions, verified details. I stuck to the facts. Unauthorized access to my account, a transaction I did not make, funds used for a third party, without my knowledge or consent. I explained I would be filing a formal report with my bank and potentially law enforcement, and that I needed the resort to log the fraudulent nature of the booking and the associated payment. There was a pause on the line. I could almost hear the internal gears turning on their end. The implications of a fraudulent booking, potential chargebacks, legal issues. They assured me they would look into it immediately and flag the reservation. They promised to contact the booking party. That was the key. They would contact him. Right there at the resort, probably with her. I hung up the phone, my hand still gripping it tight. The silence in the house felt electric. I waited. The minutes stretched, thick with anticipation. And then the screaming started.
Not mine. His.
It erupted from his phone, which I had taken the precaution of keeping within earshot. A furious, disbelieving roar that echoed through the house.
What?
What do you mean? Fraudulent? What reservation? There must be a mistake. His voice was hoarse, panicked, escalating into a torrent of angry questions directed at whoever was on the other end of his call. I could hear muffled responses from the phone, then more shouting from him. You can't just cancel it. The payment went through. Who reported it? Who? He sounded completely blindsided, completely undone. The carefully constructed facade of his perfect weekend, his stolen pleasure, was crumbling in real time. He hadn't just been caught. He had been cornered using the very system he thought he could exploit. A fraud alert wasn't just a cancellation. It was a red flag, a potential investigation, a direct hit on the legitimacy of the transaction and, by extension, on him. He hadn't anticipated me going through the resort, leveraging the financial system's safeguards against fraud. He thought I would just confront him, maybe cry, maybe leave. He hadn't prepared for me using a technical mechanism to invalidate his ill-gotten spoils while he was trying to enjoy them. His screams intensified, shifting from disbelief to pure, unadulterated rage, directed not just at the person on the phone, but implicitly at me, wherever I was in the house. He couldn't comprehend how this had happened, who would do this. He never once considered that the woman he stole from, the woman he betrayed, would fight back using cold, calculated logic and the impersonal power of a financial system. He was furious because his perfect crime, his perfect getaway, had been ruined, not by emotional drama, but by a dispassionate reporting of the facts. Fraud. The sweet, cold satisfaction spread through me, a counterpoint to the lingering pain. This wasn't just karma, this was targeted, strategic justice. I hadn't just stopped him, I had disrupted his plans in the most humiliating, inconvenient way possible, using his own actions against him. His screaming was the sound of his world collapsing, purchased with my money, and I stood calmly in the center of the storm I had created. The aftermath was a strange, quiet space after the storm of his rage subsided. He didn't come looking for me immediately. He was too busy dealing with the fallout on his end, the furious calls, the ruined plans, the likely confrontation with her. I could only imagine the scene at the resort, the awkward explanations, the shattered romance, all thanks to a simple phone call reporting fraud. It felt surreal, listening to the silence, knowing the chaos I had unleashed miles away. When he finally did appear, his face was a mask of fury and disbelief, but it was tinged with something else. Fear. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in a long time, and saw not the naive wife he thought he could walk over, but someone he didn't recognize, someone capable of hitting back hard and strategically. He yelled, he threatened, he demanded to know how I could do this, ruin everything. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stated the facts, the same facts I'd given the resort. He stole my money. He used it for something it wasn't intended for. It was fraud, and I reported it. It was that simple. The power had shifted. His bluster felt hollow now. He was the one exposed, the one facing the consequences of his actions, not just with me, but potentially with his affair partner and the financial institutions involved. He didn't win bigger. He lost everything he had tried to buy with stolen funds. He lost his weekend, his luxurious escape, and possibly his relationship with her when the truth about the money came out, if it hadn't already. Emotional closure wasn't a sudden wave of peace, but a slow, quiet settling of the dust. The marriage was over, of course. There was no coming back from this kind of betrayal, this level of calculated deceit and theft. Filing for divorce felt less like an ending and more like a necessary administrative step towards a new beginning. The money? I did get some of it back eventually, through a painstaking process with the bank and disputing the transaction. It wasn't all of it, and the process was draining, a constant reminder of what he had done. But it was enough to start rebuilding, to find my footing again. The dream of Italy felt distant now, tainted by the memory of what it was stolen for. But other dreams began to form, smaller ones at first, then larger, built on a foundation of my own resilience, my own resourcefulness. I learned that trusting someone completely means being vulnerable, and sometimes That vulnerability is exploited in the cruelest ways. But I also learned that being a victim isn't a permanent state. You can find the strength to fight back, to use your mind, to leverage the system against those who seek to exploit it. His blindsided screaming, the image of his face contorted in shock and rage when he realized I had sabotaged his perfect plan, became a strange kind of anchor. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not in a hot, burning way. It was about justice, cold and precise. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, my future. The house feels different now. Quieter, yes, but cleaner, free from the acrid smell of deceit. I am still processing the hurt, the loss, the fundamental shift in my understanding of trust and human nature. But beneath the lingering pain, there is a quiet strength, a knowledge that I faced the worst kind of betrayal, and I didn't just survive. I fought back, intelligently, strategically, and I won the battle for my own self-respect. The future isn't the one I planned, but it's mine, built on the ruins he created, stronger for having survived the fall. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.